The Wings Over New Zealand show is brought to you in association with the Wings Over New Zealand Aviation Forum, New Zealand's #1 aviation discussion forum online. There you'll find discussion on all aspects of New Zealand aviation, from history to current affairs, and thousands of photos covering the Royal New Zealand Air Force, airlines, general aviation, warbird restorations, airshow news, sport aviation, home building, gliding, aviation media, and much, much more. You'll be in good company with other aviation enthusiasts, including pilots, engineers, warbird owners and restorers, historians and authors, modelers, aviation photographers, and many others. Sign up to the Wings Over New Zealand community now. It's free and easy. Just Google Wings Over New Zealand and you'll find the forum.
Hi, Melanie here from Aviation Tours, unique itineraries for aviation enthusiasts, taking you to some of the most amazing air shows and events in the UK and Australia. They're leisurely, comfortable, fun, escorted, and to all the places you've been wanting to visit. If independent travel's out of your comfort zone, or you just prefer the good company of fellow enthusiasts on a tour taking in the best aviation, motoring and military museums, take a look at our website aviationtoursnz.com for more info and join us on the trip of a lifetime. Or call me for a chat on 021 076 8308.
Hi everybody, Andrew Gormley, CEO of Classic Flyers here. If you're interested in classic aviation and you want to get up close and personal to old aircraft and see some of New Zealand's aviation history, come across the Classic Flyers, Jean Batten Drive, Mount Maunganui, right on the edge of the airport. You can go for flights in old aeroplanes like Boeing Stearmans and Harvards. There's lots to see. Kids' parties happening here all the time. We have functions and function rooms, business meetings, and a great cafe with excellent coffee. If you'd like to be involved with Classic Flyers, we also have the volunteer groups who do all things from helping out with function work or just on the main hangar floor with visitors and guests or birthday parties, right through to engineers who get involved in restoring some of our wonderful old aircraft assets. These things are all part of New Zealand's aviation history. It's a great place and it's in a good location. Come and have a visit. Check out the website on www.classicflyersnz.com.
Welcome to the Wings Over New Zealand show with Dave Homewood.
Welcome to the Wings Over New Zealand show. I'm your host, Dave Homewood. In this episode, we have another presentation from the Wings Over New Zealand Forum meet that was held recently at Wigram, the Air Force Museum of New Zealand. The speaker is Andrew Bryan, one of the unsung heroes of preservation in this country. He has spent many years rescuing and restoring helicopters, which have ended up in various museums around the country, and these days at Helicopter Heritage, which is actually in Christchurch. And if you look on the show page for this episode, on the Wings Over New Zealand show webpage, you'll see Andrew's photographs of the various helicopters that he's talking about, and see the before and after of the restorations he's done. Here's Andrew.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name's Andrew Bryan. I'm the founder of the Helicopter Heritage Museum. Dave asked me to do a talk and I thought, what have I got to talk about? And then I rang my wife and said, I've been asked to do this talk. She said, why not? So I had to start, I'm protecting aviation history, but I haven't thought about my own history in it. So I had to try and go back to the start. So this year on the 3rd of June was the first helicopter I purchased to rebuild. I just had major surgery and I was just, for some reason, I've never been into a motorbike shop in my life. I went into Christchurch motorcycles, some people will know him, he's a Harley Davidson guy. And I saw this wreck lying there. But my original background is my father in the mid-60s had the Maria Springs Hotel, and Graham Stewart's operated Bell 47 out of there occasionally. The reason the helicopter was there is because the American pilots at the time demanded to stay in the hotel, not roughing it like the rest of the crew. and he liked his booze every night. So that was a bit of interest. We flew around in it a bit. That's probably why they went out of business, because they took more people for joyrides than probably worked. So I'd had major surgery. It was about 3 months after my surgery that I was wandering around. I was bored and I was starting to feel a bit down and everything. And I came across this at Christchurch motorcycles. Now you look at that and think, he's bloody nuts even if he attempts that. And you're right. I thought, I could rebuild this. And I did. I was lucky enough that I have an engineering background. And I thought, if they can build it in the first place, I can build it again. So I stripped it all down, repaired the back of the canopy. I was lucky enough to find a guy, Keith Brodie, up in Nelson, who was a 300 guru. And I rang him up and says, I'm after some door frames and some windows. And I sent him a photo at the time. He says, you're a F-wit. And I said, well, obviously I am, otherwise wouldn't he be attempting it? And he said, oh, come on around. So it must have been the right answer. And we've been friends for 29 years now. So this is the end product. This is what started the museum. It was accidental. I was just going to keep it for the kids to play in, and at the end I gave it to Ashburton Aviation Museum. This is the one regret in the whole thing I've done. I never kept that one. But that's beside the point. It's saved for life. So I tried to do it back to as near as possible. That was the start of it. Then we go on to the next crazy one. There's about 3,000 hours in rebuilding that. I had to rebuild the whole frame myself. I just made a jig up and back to drawings and did most of it myself. So if I hadn't had Keith, it was probably stalled then at the start. This is the second project. A Marker Air Show started in 21, I think. 2001. It was at the first air show, had a wee bit of display on there, had the TH55 there, had a few photos and everything. And I was wandering around the hangar and I spotted this up in the roof. Oh. So I've made inquiries and I found, I was put onto a Marlborough Helicopters, who were the owners. A deal was struck with Colin Bin and I took that home. So that's not much better than the HHY. This is HFU. It had been converted to Saloy, but we were to put it back as I was to put it back as a piston engine. You can see the frame's buggered again. Rebuilt that frame. I couldn't find a better one. But like everything else, once you've done it, one turns up. It was just from a burnt out machine, not a crashed machine. So that's it there before I completed it. On completion, it went to Ashburton as well. That's his permanent home now. So with Ashburton, I donated 5 machines to them, which was HHY, the very first 300, TH55A, which never flew in New Zealand. That was tied up with a importing thing from a guy selling bogus parts over on the coast. The 47 HFU, R22 AMG, and a Benson gyroglider. Along with that, I also donated 3 to Ferrymead, and a Jet Ranger as a project, H300C again, and the R44 cabin. So, and amongst that, we've done 3 to Gore as deals. The first 2 was a R22 and a 12E Hilla in exchange for his Tiger Moth. He had an open storage and he wanted it to go somewhere where it wasn't going to deteriorate anymore. So we did the deal with him. And then later I had a Long Ranger, which I swapped him for a Hughes 500 airframe. I had the bits to finish it. The other one was reasonably complete, but it had never flown in New Zealand, and I was more trying to protect the New Zealand aviation. So that was the early stages. Then round 2 came. I still at that stage I had HLY 500, HEI 300, Jet Ranger HVH, and a Squirrel HGV, which I still have to these days. Half of them are Storm projects. A sort of time-waiting game to find the parts. And I was working out of the Kaiapoi mill at the time. And along came Daniel Smith from Daniel Smith Industries. You may know him in Rangiora. He said, I'm building a big museum, car collection, but I want to house your helicopters. So a deal was struck. He'd provide me with a workshop. They saved me money for a start off. And we were to set out with my findings and his money to grow this machine collection. So that was about 6 years ago. Our first machine we got together was this, a Llama. HSK used to be Marine helicopters at one stage in Auckland, Ardmore, before going to Northland helicopters. They had the sister ship, which is ISK, which they damaged probably 5 years ago now. I don't know what's happened to it. They did have it for sale. So that's getting it back. It's 90% complete. And that was it before we hung it up on the roof. We fully stripped it and repainted it to what it looks now. It just looks like a up and go. It still has, some of the parts still have good life, but it's got a 12-yearly thing that it needs to worry about. And then came the Brantley. I'd heard about this Brantley at least 20 odd years ago, and I thought it was just a myth. It'd been in a container over in Littleton, stuck on the side of the hill. And I thought, oh, well, I'll make inquiries, thinking it's a big joke. So I found out that the last owner was a guy Stark. So I went over to Stark Brothers in Littleton, wandered in the office, says, oh yes, we do have that. Can I see it? No. Do you want to loan it to the museum or whatever? I said, no, we can't because we don't know where the owner actually is. It was one of the brothers, he had disappeared a number of years earlier. They hadn't been in touch with him again. I think they ended up making him legally dead to sort out of his estate. Anyway, let's shut that down. 20 years later, I've decided to approach him again. Time makes up everything. And I approached them, and at the time they were thinking about selling their business. And he said, well, we're going to do something with it. We have to do something with it. But I don't know what we'll do. 2 days later, I got a phone call. We'll be dropping it off to you tomorrow. Still hadn't seen it. And that's how it arrived. So it'd been sitting in this open container in the side of the hill for 20 odd, probably 30 years, and that's what it looked like. Still had no clue what it looked like, inside or outside. We threw the wrappings off, and that's what we struck. This guy Stark had had an accident and was going through the rebuild process with Alan Mitchner, and then they came down to some finer details, which the whole thing stalled. As you can see, the rats and everything have been living in it for a while. But it's probably 99% complete. That was it before we put the outer blades on. They had the unusual system of 2 blades, inner and outer. And that's just before we took it over to hang it up on the roof as well. So that was the very first one to come in. It taught a lot of the deer recovery pilots to fly down in Makarora, around that way. And the next one, Hilla 1100, Goodwin McNutt's. I believe that was the first to do commercial flights from Fox Glacier, but we'll come back to that. I'd always known he had the flying one, and I thought, one day I was out that way and I thought, oh bugger, I'll call in and see him. You never know what's going to go. And I called in there, and I was met by Goodwin. Nice guy, first time I met him. He could have told me to piss off, but he didn't. Instead he showed me around, enthusiasm, and he opens up this container and here there's sitting. So I said, oh, what are you doing with it? And he said, oh, I don't know, I'll talk to the family. Talked to the family, the next day he rang up and says, yeah, we'll sell it to you. He said, we've got insurance to pay on the other one. And I said, yeah, that's fine. So we struck up a deal, and that was picking it up. As you see, it's a bit worse for wear, but it was probably 90-odd% there. We reupholstered it when we cleaned it up. We still haven't painted it. Well, that was when it was at Fox. It was part of their collection. But it's all together hanging up on the roof, which that was a pleasure to deal with the family, and we've always loved it. And we'll get around to finishing it. The next one, in 21, Dan brought the HJH as a flying 47, which he has based at Rangiora. Does about 4 or 5 hours a year. Still haven't flown on it. Still haven't seen it out of the hangar. I get always promised, but our pilots are both based over in Europe flying fires. Those big Sikorsky sky cranes. So it's only when they're around that it ever gets out. Then came this, NZ 3901, the very first WASP helicopter. This was purchased by Don Zabriskie off the Air Force. He paid $5,000 for it. And he started in the process of putting it back together. And when he decided to disband his collection, we were offered it. We paid $10,000 for it. Came with 2 torpedoes, which he paid $1,000 for off the Navy at the time, or the Army, the Air Force. I'm not sure who. And we brought that back. We got it back about 3 days before Anzac Day. So it was all rush and go to display it at the RSA in Rangiora for the weekend. It sat on a trailer there. And that was quite a huge attraction at the time. And then we got into the first of the Wessexes. Our first Wessex is a Mark 60. It's stripped down and reskinned by here in Christchurch with Bruce O'Malley before going to Mark 4 up in Stratford. Nothing ever happened with it. So I haven't shown you a photo of that one. Then we purchased the Mark 5 off Mark. It's a XR 511. It served in the Dhofar War. Dhofar was it? Something like that. That's the picture of it on the cover of the book. It was flying, arrived in New Zealand, but hasn't flown since it arrived in New Zealand. And that's it. They're a big beast. It's not until you actually climb up the side of it to sit in it, you realise how big they are. Like everything, they take up a lot of room. And this is our Hilla 12E. We got that from Helicopter Management in Hamilton. It's 90% complete. Well, probably more than that. He brought it, it was Worldwide Helicopters in its early days, before going over to Aussie and coming back here as a parts machine. The first thing he took out was the blades and swapped transmissions. But actually, the photos, sorry, they don't look very clear, do So it's as close as you'll get to a flying one just for looking. That was before we stripped out all the spray gear out of it. And then we come to our first of our donated ones by Starless Aviation. We started this deal with Airworks before they sold out. Went up to look at a BK. This was sitting outside. Basically complete tail was off it. And so what's happening with that? He said we're just waiting for it to drop a big weight on it and crush it. Still had its doors and everything else. So that's what we ended up getting from them. We're still waiting for the rest of the parts. In the time frame of swapping over from Starless to Airworks to Starless, they forgotten what they'd put in the container. So we got to double up a BK cowlings instead of the squirrel. And that was the airframe we got from for the BK. It was gutted a bit more than what we were anticipating, but they'll come back all right. The interior's in it, missing instrument panel, missing the flight gear. So that's as it stands at the moment, pretty much. That was Triple N. That operated out of Germany as an air medic machine. Came in here to be parted out. And then we go to HOB, which I think it's HOB. It came from Ashburton. It started out as a revolutionary Mini 500, single seater. The guy down there converted it to a two-seater with a turbine engine on it. He'd never got permission to fly it as a two-seater, so that second seat was always blocked off, which, according to the experts over in America, so just as well. The centre of gravity had been all the way out. They'd need to extend the tail boom and they wanted a bigger blade area. But that's a fun toy. We had the engine running on it. And we got this toy from GCH back in that's 24 as well. That was made over in Aussie for them. They took it around a few shows. I saw it. I used to work for aviation security, so just perimeter of the airport. I was always sitting outside as long as I can remember. So I approached them during COVID, and yep, we managed to get that off them. It's a great thing to play in, but certification to use it now is just ridiculous. You got to have a professional pilot to sit beside you, just to leave the trailer about 6 feet. The blades spin when it's operating. And then we ended up getting a Saunders Row, which is HJG, has flown in New Zealand, and a Westland Scout HQU. Both were imported into New Zealand 15 years ago. The guy had them on Wanaka for a start off, and then they went off up to Motueka to pop back into the air after they'd been sitting for a while. They sat up there. We brought them down here for storage. And the one we call, I don't actually have photos of them, that's how terrible I am. We call the Raspberry Ripple. That was out at Rangiora last year to put back in the air. Got to the final stage of the blade balancing. It was running for that day and then shut down overnight. The engine seized, so that was wrapped. Because all the other engines we've got, we couldn't guarantee them. None of them we doubted had been in, but I've missed out. I'm sure I've missed out a bit. But this year, so far this year, we have this one, ICV, Long Ranger. It's been parted, well, everything inside's original, still there, but it's had its running gear parted out. Got nice upholstery and everything in it. Oops, sorry. So So that's the start of this year. And just to conclude to it, I've missed out stuff, sorry. We have a collection of 24 helicopters now, based in Rangiora. Thousands of photos, net guns, all that sort of stuff. This has consumed 9 years of my life now, coming up 30 next year. And would I change it? No. It's probably cost me 2 wives. Probably $100,000 just in travel and chasing up parts. I still don't regret it. 95% of all the work's been done by me, just for our pleasure of others. And it's like everything, New Zealand helicopters have played a huge part in New Zealand's former years and into the future. And it also goes to say, without sponsors, donators, people gave up their time, the treasures, it just wouldn't exist. So, thank you. So is there any questions or?
How many of them are airworthy?
One.
Only one?
Out the 47. Yep.
What does it cost to get it?
Nothing. We're not open to the public at this stage because the museum actually hasn't been built. But if you want to ring, there's a pamphlet there, we'll take you through. It's over basically 3 buildings these days, but as a collection, Dan has a collection of approximately 300 cars. So the museum's going out in the corner of Flaxton Road and what's the other one? Can't think of it. There's a site, if you go at Rangiora, it's a big roundabout on Flaxton Road, you see that site there. Supposedly due to start next month. The whole complex will be, the museum for the helicopters designed to hold 32, with the cars being on the other end, a small boutique type shopping centre and a hotel motels, because nobody makes money out of museums. You need that other infrastructure to support it.
The Saunders Road, is that a skeeter?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it is.
Ex-British Army?
Yep. It's only done 600 hours from new. So it has a wasp's tail. The tail folds, but it's on landing gear. That's good.
Sourcing of parts.
Very difficult.
So where do you source them?
In the old days, I had Graham Bolstrad from Halley Repair outfit in Auckland. He used to supply me a lot of components. You got Salis, you got local GCH, Christchurch helicopters, you go to Wanaka, you go all over the country. They've been around long enough now that people know I do exist, and that trust thing from the old days is gone. You know, nobody trusted anyone after, especially when all the bogus parts were around. So we've overcome that hurdle. But the old New Zealand motto, don't chuck any away in case something grows new time or something like that. So yeah, New Zealand has a big history of so much stuff out there, but they won't part with it because they think it will grow time or they might be able to use it for something else. And in the old days, there was a lot caught out that way. So yeah, but those days are gone. They'll never come back. You know, you can't add time now, not for something that's 50 years old or whatever. Our aims, we did try to get one of the Air Force's Iroquois back because none of them have been sold. They went over to Dakota Air Parts. They haven't sold one piece of it. There's something to do with my understanding was New Zealand used some different types of parts to what other operators use. So they were trying to sell it as a parcel. There's no takers at this stage. But then they said, oh, if you want one, we'll give you one for $1 million. But yeah, for a museum, we don't need to spend that sort of money. We'll find one day. We'd like one of these sea sprites as well, of course. And yeah. They were ever hopeful. We did try to get one of the Sioux, but because the Air Force Museum got 2, they decided not to send a 3rd one to South Island. That's the only reason we missed out on it. Well, that's what we're told, anyway. I've got no doubts that's probably the case. So we're still growing.
That's not what didn't have anything to do with
No.
that yet.
No, it's up in their process up north.
And I'll follow that up.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah, that was a decision made up north.
Yeah, we're subject to decisions made up north.
Yeah.
As you were last Wednesday.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes they're good decisions. Yeah.
But, you know, going forward, we still aim to grow it. I've got that stage in life now that I am 70 this year. So I've started boxing everything out and putting it with each machine that's not complete. So I suddenly pop off tomorrow, at least somebody knows how to finish it. Or knows what belongs with what. That's about the only thing that's changed in 29 years. I didn't care who knew whatever. Anything else? There's pamphlets here if you want. If you want to come out and view, just give us a ring. I'll happily show you around. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pull that.
That was the Wings Over New Zealand show with Dave Homewood.